We'll call the meeting to order. Do I have some Boy Scouts here to come up with, help with this Pledge of Allegiance? You guys come up forward here. Just come right down here in front. I join you to help us out with Pledge of Allegiance. You guys come right down here. Flag's right over here. Ready? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Gary.
Here.
Grinberg.
Here.
Pepcorn.
Here.
Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. Health, the Fargo County Public Health hosted a retirement celebration on November 28th for the Principal Office Associate Linda Anderson, who is recognized for 41 years of dedicated service. They're going to miss her. She really knew a lot of that ins and outs of that place. The library has added mobile wireless hotspots to its circulating collection to enable individuals and families to access needed digital resources. The hotspots can be checked out the same way as a book or a DVD, are available at all 3 library locations and can be checked out for up to 3 weeks. So if you don't have internet in your apartment, you could use a hotspot. There are several interesting programs, events happening in the library the next couple of weeks, including a story time featuring the classic Nutcracker and a visit by the dancers from FM Ballet on December 4th, a holiday concert by the FM Choral Artist on December 8th, 2 Sneaky Elves holiday craft making sessions on December 8th and 11th, teen crafts featuring clay gingerbread ornaments on December 11th and 13th, and the Traveling Lantern Theater Company to perform a Christmas carol at the main library on December 17th. And the 3rd annual Northern Narratives Writing Project will have several open writing sessions throughout the winter. The Police Department's No Shave Movember fundraising effort raised $9,616 to help the police department's families fight against cancer. One of their members is in a fight with cancer this time. Deb Tellinghausen has retired from the Fargo Police Department after 22 years of service to the Crime-Free Programs Coordinator. And congratulations to Downtown Resource Officer Jessica White, who has been accepted for the 35 Under 35 Women's Leadership Program sponsored by the United Way. Solid waste. Residents are encouraged to take advantage of the free holiday lights recycling program if the lights are not working or are no longer needed. You know that clump of holiday lights you have somewhere hidden in your house? You can bring them by. Residents can drop them off, including new style LED lights and older styles with screw-in bulbs, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Hazardous Waste Facility, 606 43.5 Street North. Rope lights cannot be recycled. This recycling program is available through January 31st. So if you get through Christmas, you want to get rid of your lights, good place to drop them off. Other, Block 9 construction downtown is on schedule. Auger cast foundations were completed mid-November, and 367 piers were created at the foundation for the building. They're 110 feet deep, include 19 tons of rebar and more than 300 truckloads of concrete. This week, the crews are beginning to mobilize a 500-ton hydro crane to erect 2 twin towers. When fully extended, the 2 towers or cranes will be at heights of 304 feet and 277 feet, both which are taller than the Radisson. Operations are on track for above-ground construction to start within the next few weeks. So the holiday times will be fun with those new towers, right, Jim? You're not going to have holiday lights on them or anything, no? They did put a nice Christmas tree up, thank you.
Bison flag.
Yep. For the bison, yeah, we can do something now. The city will host community open house tomorrow from 4 to 8 p.m. as the official grand opening of the new Fargo City Hall. The mayor and the commissioners and many of the staff will be there to greet you. We'll have a short program at 5 o'clock in the new City Hall Commission chambers on the main floor. So if the city, everybody gets to take a look at that. And the Fargo South High School Musician Assembly, Bella Osa Voci, will perform at 5:30 p.m. Visitors can explore all 3 floors and building to an open house with city staff members giving tours with each department. Refreshments will be offered in the main lobby. And then one other thing we need to note is Katie Glenn, who helped move into City Hall, is going to move on in her career and go somewhere else. So I just have us give a round of applause for all her hard work to get us from City Hall. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. Approve the order of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of agenda, moving item 1B from the consent agenda to the beginning of the regular agenda, and item number 6 from the consent agenda to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Move. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the November 19th, 2018 regular meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve consent items 1 through 34, excluding items 1B and 6, which are moved to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Regular agenda, receive and file ordinance 1 week prior to amending section 25-1506 of Article 2515 of Chapter 25 of the Fargo Municipal Code relating to alcoholic beverages. It said Nancy Morris was going to do this, but I guess Steve Sprague is.
I'll try to stand in for Nancy as best I can. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This ordinance that we're talking about modifying is the one that has allowed us to do the open carry, open consumption in the downtown area during DCP events. We just felt that this is a good time to kind of review the different events that we've had and how it's gone. We brought the ordinance revision to the Liquor Control Board in October, and at that time, we were instructed to reach out to the other licensees in the downtown area and just to see what kind of comments that we got. Generally speaking, the comments that we got, the reviews were very positive, and people were supportive and wanted to continue with it. There were some comments that felt that maybe it should be opened up a little more and made a little bit less restrictive than just being a DCP event. And just wanted to kind of review some of the features of it. Right now, the way that it's set up, it's for a DCP event only. Applications are received. If you think of like street fair with the different vendor tents that they have, it was kind of similar with the alcohol too, that they could apply to be a member or be involved in this. And just like with the vendor tents, there's more applications received than there would be spots available. You don't want to just flood it with alcohol. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And then the DCP had a number of costs that they incurred, and so they needed to recover some of those costs. Whether it was additional security, the police, we had additional police presence, the cost of the cups and the wristbands and some of that kind of stuff. One of the things in the planning process with this, we wanted to make sure that we were controlling the access to the alcohol and to make sure that it was being used the way that it was intended. And so control and access was very important. One of the suggestions was that instead of using the DCP wristband and cup, that they just sell like a commemorative mug that they could take to any business and have it filled and then carry it around downtown. And, I mentioned at the Liquor Control Board, that sounds an awful lot like a pub crawl, and I'm not sure that that's exactly what the downtown really wanted to see. The other comment that we received too was that it was kind of a pay to play, but again, there were significant costs that were incurred that needed to be recouped. And so the final comment that I'll make and then turn it over to Melissa Rademacher is that this is just the beginning. We've only done this for 6 months, and so it's kind of like riding that bike with the training wheels on. We may be willing to take the training wheels off, but I don't know that we're ready to jump up to that 10 speed or whatever yet. So Melissa has some comments and some slides.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to review the 4 select events that we opened it up for the open carry. Steve Sprague did a great job in terms of the introduction to them, but I want to do a slideshow in terms of what really captured and what happened during these 4 events. So for the 4 events, the first one was the Downtown Fargo Street Fair. Basically, it was on July 19th through the 21st. This was the first event that we delivered the open carry to allow it to be taking place. The street fair attracts over 100,000 people of all ages. Our goal was to keep it family-friendly and to stay true to really what the event is all about. We have over 250 local artists, crafters, and food trucks that covered 7 blocks of downtown area. We had 5 liquor vendors that were spread throughout the route. We also had 5 people who were considered our liquor task force and that partnered with the police support, and those people were really truly just walking the streets. They were uniformed, they were clearly marked that they were part of liquor task force, and they were there to educate, not enforce. We wanted to make sure that this was truly a genuine experience, that we wanted to make sure the public, we were there to support them, not to enforce and put them in jail. This was one of the signs and maps that were provided to all of the vendors, as well as the liquor task force, as well as the police. We actually partnered with the police and liquor task force to create this. And on the map, what's shown in blue is where we clearly defined with stanchions that no alcohol could be beyond this point. But we also had people positioned at those spots to make sure that they were telling people along the streets on where they could and could not walk with the open container. Second, corks and canvas. We had 2 corks and canvases this year that we tested this open carry. One was on August 9th and one was October 11th. We kept it around 20 participating businesses. We opened it up to both DCP members and non-DCP members to apply and to participate in these events. There again, it's all about experience and education. We did not want to promote liquor that you can openly carry it, but we also wanted to feature the artists and also educate them on the wine. In the about the artists and the wine, and that's something that we are very passionate and wanting to do go forward. And then thirdly is certified pourers. We created a checklist that all the participating businesses had to have a certified pourer on site. This was something that was not done in the past. This is an example of the signage and map provided to all the participating businesses, as well as customers could take it with them so they could understand what businesses were involved, but also show where they could walk around with the glass of wine. We also partnered with the police department and BID to come up with this route. So we were covered on both aspects. And then last, we had Winterfest. We had that November 20th in conjunction with the Holiday Lights Parade. We entertained 3 liquor vendors, 3 food vendors. We had fire pits, we had homemade s'mores. We wanted to also be family friendly and close off half a block around 2nd Avenue. During the parade, we had a warming tent, and we allowed people to walk around with a hot toddy or a warm cider or a local beer from our brewery. So we wanted to make sure that we added that experience, but also in a controlled environment. This is an example of one of the cups that we had provided for the hot toddies during Winterfest. As you can see, it's clearly labeled. We did run this by police for both the clear cups and the paper cups to make sure it was in compliance. This is an example of the Winterfest map showing the route on where people could walk around with a drink, and we also used the stanchions showing where those parameters were. This was showing an ID. We ID for every single purchase. This is something that we provided to all the vendors, but we also made sure that it was very visible to all the customers and all the vendors that we partnered with. We made sure that they were all compliant and making sure they were communicating and educating people who are participating in the event. And then control and access. We could not have done these 4 events successfully without our partners. The liquor vendors that we chose, we've had logistics meetings, planning meetings, and it's all about the details. It's amazing that the liquor vendors that we partnered with held each other accountable, because if one didn't follow the rules, they knew that we were all going to get in trouble, which was amazing. It helped all of our jobs. We also worked with the Fargo police in terms of the routes. Like I mentioned, with all 4 events, they were very, very much involved. We had logistics meeting in the office, talking through all of the different scenarios and making sure the public knew, as well as we were covered with signs. And like I mentioned before, open application. These events are not just for DCP members, we open it up to the public. And we want to make sure that everybody has a fair chance, whether it's street fair or Corks and Canvas or future events for open carry, that we can allow other people outside of the DCP to participate. So this is an example of one of the applications that we had for Corks and Canvas, and it states member rate as well as a non-member rate. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Steve?
Chris would like to, is that all right if Chris Helmick, the lieutenant for the downtown beat, has a couple comments? He's coming up.
We'd love to hear from him.
Okay.
Evening, Mayor, Commissioners. At the request of the Liquor Control Board, I did an analysis to see how these events impacted our police services downtown. During that analysis, I looked at two things. We looked at the calls for service that we experienced last year during the street fair versus this year. And we also looked at the number of open container citations that we wrote this year versus last year. Beyond that, we also looked at the average Thursday, Friday, Saturday call load throughout the summer in both years to kind of see, was the street fair an anomaly? What I found with the calls for service is that our calls actually went down during this year's street fair, which was somewhat surprising because it does bring a lot of people downtown and a lot of service calls. And when I looked at the average number of calls on a typical Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, again, the call load during the street fair was actually lower. When I looked at the number of open container citations written, comparing the 2 years, this year we actually wrote 0 open containers on Thursday and Friday, and we wrote 2 on Saturday. It should be noted that those 2 were not related to the street fair. They were actually just during the normal course of business. On an average Thursday, Friday, or Saturday during the summer, we'll typically write anywhere between 3 and 4 open container citations. So we actually saw a pretty significant drop during the street fair. As far as staffing goes, we had 1 additional officer working the street fair this year versus last year. Last year we had 1, this year we had 2. In addition, we had our 2 downtown resource officers working during the entire event for a total of 4 officers each day. So that was a slight increase in our demand, but was certainly manageable. What I noted for the success of the street fair, there were a couple of factors that I observed. One was definitely having the planning with the DCP. We were actively involved in that, and we were constantly communicating with Melissa and her staff to plan this event. Also, the presence of their own volunteer group to monitor the consumption and help enforce the rules and educate the public was a success. Their willingness to pay for the additional officers that were going to be needed for this event, which they have done every year, but this year the 1 additional was an added expense. And also there was some public education that was done ahead of the event that the DCP did and we did to let the public know that this was now going to be an option, but also to help communicate what those rules were going to be so that people weren't surprised when they came downtown. And then the last major factor that I see is the fact that the DCP wanted to keep this a family-friendly event and not focused on alcohol consumption. And I think that contributes to the success of the event as well. When I looked at Corks and Canvas, there really was no impact. It's obviously a much smaller event. We did have 1 officer working during each one of those evenings. The officer said there were no problems with that event, even though there was a pretty good turnout. And then with the Holiday Lights Parade, we had 2 officers working that event, besides the officers directly involved in the parade. And again, no problems with the consuming in public. So all in all, these events seem to be successful from our point of view.
You know, when you're talking about when we have all the events downtown, an extra officer might, for 100,000 people, wouldn't we need an extra officer anyway?
Yes.
So it is really
absolutely.
expense or something we normally do.
Absolutely.
And then aren't you and the chief in the downtown now doing event type staffing sometimes when there's more people?
Yes, especially for the larger events. And street fair, certainly that is one that we definitely put extra officers out every year, whether it's at our expense or the DCP's expense, just for the sake.
Melissa's willing to pay us the extra money for that, or? Thank you. Any questions, of commissioners?
I have one.
Commissioner Gary?
Steve, you said that you got feedback from at least some that said that they wanted to be less restrictive, and that's a good discussion we had as well. Did they give examples of how that might look, or what, when they say less restrictive, do they say what they meant by that?
Yeah, well, that was the example I gave with the cup. They would sell a commemorative cup, and you just take it into any business and fill it and carry it around. And so, and that, like I said, that sounds an awful lot like a pub crawl to me. So it just would, instead of being a pub crawl from, within the business, you'd be taking it out on the streets. And
Sure.
I'm not sure that's where we want to go, so.
Sure. So with this again, I'll vote the same way I did last time. I completely support the idea. I think it's great for the downtown. I think it'd be great for other places in Fargo. The way this ordinance is written, it's just for the DCP in downtown Fargo, and I want to see that expanded to other places. The opportunity, at least, to be in South Fargo or wherever else, to give the opportunity to other people. So completely support the idea. I'm glad it went well. I knew that it would, but I'll vote no because I want it to be more expansive.
So do you move to approve?
I do not. You don't want me to make the motion?
Oh, okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can I make just a couple quick comments? So
Sure.
I think
Of
that the
course.
main thing is the DCP, to have a responsible party, that's critical. But I think we'll get pressure from other groups. That's the concern for me. And I do think the downtown neighborhood was concerned that what happens if we start having this every weekend? And so I think those are a couple of the things that we have to be wary of. The DCP is great, and they've done a great job, but how do we not allow another group to do that? And I think that we need to hold them to the higher standard that the DCP has set. And so I guess that's the comment that I'd like to make. It's phenomenal, and I think they've done a good job, and we want to continue the success. What concerns me is if it starts growing and it gets out of control, and then it ruins it for everybody. And that's, I think that's my concern. Thanks.
Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Gehrig?
No.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. We'll go through a State Water Commission request for cost reimbursement FM diversion flood project. A is $244,520.99, and that's concerning Oxbow area. And then B is cost total $11,892.35. Kent will explain if anybody has any questions. Do I have a motion?
I'll move 35A.
And B?
Did we change our course of,
Dave's been okay with it.
okay, I'll move 35A and B.
I'll second them both.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg?
No, I mean aye.
Good one.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. We will go to public hearings then. Kent, are you ready? Resolution is issued. Who's going next?
He wants to go on 36.
37?
Oh, public hearing, I'm sorry. I could have done your bond. You were halfway up here. Okay, we'll take you, Mark. Application request establishing a Jefferson Neighborhood Historic Overlay Zoning District, Eddy Place addition, blocks 10 through 16 and 24 through 43. Eddy and Fullers addition lots, block 167, Case, Pleat, and Hall addition, and blocks 167, Fuller's addition, south of First Avenue South, west of 14th Street South, University Drive South, north of 6th Avenue South, and east of 15th Street South. Approval recommended by the Planning Commission on 11/6/18, and this first reading of rezoning ordinance. Mark Williams.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. What you have in front of you is the Jefferson Historic Overlay. It's an opportunity we've been working on for a while. The neighborhood collected data regarding the properties involved in there around 2017, and then there's some federal money that became available to us through the State Historic Society that gave us the opportunity to hire a consultant to be able to finish up this Jefferson Historic Overlay. We have 4 other overlays within our community. We went through the bidding process and hired SRF as the consultant, and it went to the Historic Preservation Commission in October and was unanimously approved for the recommendation. And then it went to Planning Commission in November with a unanimous approval. Tim Magnuson with SRF is here to explain the overlay. Any
Okay.
questions?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. As Mark said, I'm Tim Magnuson, Associate Planner with SRF Consulting, a neighbor of yours over in the Case Building. So
The Jefferson Neighborhood Historic Overlay District, we started working on it the latter part of the summer. The Fargo City staff started last August. They had a community meeting in the Jefferson neighborhood, and after that meeting, decided how big an overlay area that should be included in it. I do have a slideshow that I'm going to run through here. The Jefferson neighborhood itself is about 1 square mile. When we first heard about the overlay district, we were a little bit overwhelmed, thinking an overlay district that big is this big. But when we saw that it was only about a 9.5 square block area, it was much more manageable, down to 232 parcels. So it surrounds pretty much the Bethany Retirement Home on University Drive. Some examples of the houses that are in the area that are historic. Victorian up on the left, a Tudor to the upper right, Craftsman on the lower left, and an American Foursquare in the middle. And one of the reasons for historical overlay districts are to try and keep the character of the structures. The Craftsman in the lower left-hand corner there is not pristine, but it's not out of character either. A Craftsman would normally have an open porch area. This porch somewhere in the ownership of the property has been enclosed, but it hasn't been enclosed to the detriment of the character of the property. Why a historic overlay district? Well, of the 232 parcels in this neighborhood, this area, 85% of them were constructed prior to 1940. And if you look at the decades listed off there, over half of them were constructed before 1920. So there's some character in the neighborhood, some old buildings or old residences. They've been kept up, but the overlay district is there to ensure that they remain kept up, and again, the character of the neighborhood is maintained. An overlay district gives the planning department or the zoning officials a little bit of an extra regulation to keep the architectural and historical significance of the properties. Protects property values for people who live there now, and for someone who wants to buy a property there. With the historic overlay district, they can be a little bit more at ease that if they buy a property there, that all of a sudden the house next door is going to turn into something that's not in character with the neighborhood. And it also contributes to the overall neighborhood's quality of life and economic vitality. The main part of an overlay district is the development, the special development standards. They would apply to existing properties, primary structures, accessory structures, and demolitions, which sounds unusual, but they're included. It applies to exterior work on the houses or on the properties. If you want to redo your kitchen, if you want to take all the walls in your house and rearrange them, it does not apply there. It applies to exterior work only, something that's visible from the street. So again, it's an aesthetic regulation to ensure the character of the neighborhood is maintained. A certificate of appropriateness, if you need a permit to do something on the outside of your house, it requires that you go to the Historic Preservation Commission, and they have to review it, and they have to issue a certificate of appropriateness. If that all goes well, you get your building permit, you move ahead. Some of the areas that they will review during applications is siding, windows, doors, dormers, roofs, entrances, and porches. So they look at all of those things you can see from the street. And if you want to make some changes, they would like to see you utilize materials that are as close as possible to what's there now. But if that's not feasible, there are ways that you can use alternative materials and still get the same effect and get a certificate of appropriateness through the Historic Preservation Commission. So, like I said, this has been a relatively long process. It started back in August of 2017 with the city staff. We've been involved since about the end of July or August. What we did was we drafted the special development standards. We held a community meeting. We drafted those standards, and then we took them to the community that was affected. Those parties that are in the proposed overlay district, we took those standards out to them and presented them at a public meeting at the Bethany Community Hall. And we got a pretty good response. There were questions. Most of the questions didn't relate to aspects of the historic overlay district. There was a little bit of a confusion that some people thought that building codes were becoming more restrictive as opposed to historic overlay standards, which don't have anything to do with the building codes themselves. And the support we got there was very good. After that, we took a draft to the Historic Preservation Commission, and it was mentioned that they passed it unanimously. We drafted the zoning ordinance amendment, took it to the Planning Commission. It has passed the Planning Commission, which brings us to tonight. We are here to present this to you with hopes that we get a positive response from you as commissioners to the adoption of the Jefferson Neighborhood Historic Overlay District. If you've got any questions that I might be able to answer.
Any questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So that you talked about the screened-in porch. So hypothetically now, if someone wanted to do that, they would have to go and get permission from that. And let me just ask, would they be allowed to do that?
I am not a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, so I can't answer that. But it would be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission, and I can't even guess as to what the outcome would be.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gregg?
Full disclosure, Tim, I know you.
Yeah, I was going to say, you told me you weren't going to ask any questions.
I know, yeah. Tim was a lieutenant colonel at the Guard, as an intel analyst when I was a young airman, so good to see you again.
He was a good worker back then, too.
Lies. All right. So to kind of piggybacking on what Dave's, I think, kind of going towards, when I hear these things, it makes me feel like if I buy an entry-level home and I want to fix it up, my home to be the home that I want it to be, that would either make it more expensive or not possible. Is that a legitimate concern?
I suppose it's a legitimate concern. I guess the very end of the ordinance has what all zoning ordinances tend to have in them is it has the opportunity to apply for a variance. Make your argument and see what happens.
Sure. You know, when I bought my first home in South Fargo, it was a 1956 home. I put steel siding on it. I expanded the driveway. I did the things that I wanted to do to it. And I can't really wrap my head around the idea of having to ask my neighbors if it's okay to make my house nicer, more expensive, more valuable. These overlays, I think, have good intent. But it sounds to me like we're making it more difficult to get into an entry-level home, improve that home, someday sell that home, and then move into your longer-term property. So for that reason, in general, I don't support these kind of overlays. I understand why people do, but I'll be voting against it.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak regarding this? Well, you both can come.
I actually just purchased my home in this neighborhood about 2 years ago, and I bought it as a starter home. And I know my next-door neighbor actually was trying to sell their house, and they were selling it as a starter home. There's quite a few houses in our neighborhood who are rental homes, and they end up renting to college students and things, so there is damage, and I'd like this to not pass, just because I'm afraid that it's going to deter people from upgrading and replacing things that need to be replaced and upgraded. I also know while there are some beautiful homes in the neighborhood, there's quite a few that just will end up deteriorating over time.
Could you give name and address, please?
My name is Marcel Baumgartner, and my address is 1436 Fifth Avenue South.
Thank
It's
you.
right across the street from one of those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Morgan?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners and Council. I'm Dawn Morgan. I'm president of the Jefferson Neighborhood Association and also president of the Fargo Neighborhood Coalition. And I've been involved with works in historic preservation for years on end. With the Fargo Heritage Society, for one, I kind of got started with that, but got started actually because I own a historic home. It was built in 1891. When I moved into it, it was a wreck. And because of my interests in historic preservation, there are some things that I didn't change about the house and improvements that I've been able to make. The guidelines for the historic preservation overlay are very generic, and they're the same ones that have been used in all of the historic districts in Fargo. I can speak to your question, Dave, about the screen porch. I was at a meeting when there was someone on South 8th Street that came to ask if he could screen his porch. It hadn't been previously. And the comments, see, the Historic Preservation Commission, I was on that for 9 years. What they do is they make recommendations to you as to what the standards would be at the optimal condition. But they also allow for variances, for instance, siding, steel siding. They would say, okay, we would prefer wood, but if steel is what you want, then that's fine. So you can always use a material that's similar, especially in design. So for instance, if narrow lap siding is common in the particular neighborhood, then they would probably want you to use that, but you could still use steel. So I think that the Historic Preservation Commission really is there to make recommendations to people. People not only in historic districts, but to those who would like to maintain historic character in their homes. They're actually a resource, an educational resource. And so I've worked with them for a lot. I respect the work that they do, and I would really appreciate it. We worked really hard to do the survey, and we tried to keep the district fairly small so that it wasn't extending out into areas where there were, a real mix of houses. The neighborhood is kind of interesting because it goes from the corner of University and Main down to 13th Avenue and 25th. So in the area where I live, in my 1891 house, it's the houses are older. Many of them are in elegant style. And then by the time you get down to 13th Avenue and 25th, where Carl Ben Eielson Elementary School was built after World War II, that's where the GI Bill kind of kicked in. So there are a lot of different style houses there that are more like post-war houses. But even so, those after 50 years buildings are considered to be historic. So we would like to make recommendations to people as to what they can do with their homes to create a greater value. The other thing is that the historic overlay creates a contiguous sense so that the values of the homes don't deteriorate because there's something terribly inappropriate. Heritage Society is having their holiday party. I'm going to give you invitations, all of you. And I'd like you to come to see a home that is on South 8th Street, that it is in a historic district. And actually, it's been of great benefit to the city of Fargo. I just like to think we're making progress in creating value for our core neighborhoods, that we're not abandoning them to just whatever can happen. I've made this comment several times before that if Roosevelt had had a historic overlay, they wouldn't have as many problems as they have. And I still would like to see Roosevelt get one so that they can at least, contain what they possibly can in that historic element. There are many people that love to live in historic homes, and there's nothing more exciting, I can tell you, than falling in love with a historic home and working on it. I've been in my house for 35 years. I love the place. I work on it every day, pretty much, just whenever I have time. So I would recommend approval. Thank you. Any questions, by the way?
Any questions by commissioners? Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Is there a second? Mr. Strand?
Second.
I do note in your historic work there, the Fargo mayor 100 years ago used to live in that neighborhood and had a streetcar that went just down to his house and back. So I would like you to work on that, because that'd be fun for me to have a streetcar come out and I could just grab that and come to work. But it might be an autonomous vehicle, so we'll see how that works out. Thank you very much.
I was going to point that out, just to make sure you'd read the.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Commissioner Strand?
I just have a question, and I'm not sure Don or whom would be the best to answer this, but my sense is there's not a lot of teeth in any of these statutes or laws across the state or locally anyway. It's more the spirit of the intention. I mean, when it really comes right down to it, you know, we can have an overlay and we can have some expectations and we can hope, but in the end, is there any teeth? And I need to hear you at the mic if I could, or whomever could answer that, but, you know,
I
because.
think Mark could answer that. If there's a question of the overlay, can the overlay have any teeth in it? It appears to me it would have to come to commission.
I had spoke to the project manager, and I was told if I put forward a request, they could decline it, meaning I wouldn't be able to make that adjustment to my own home.
The Historic Preservation Commission is primarily there for educational purposes, and it would be ideal if it did have some teeth, but it doesn't. So to answer your question, the only place that it does is if there are federal dollars involved. So like, for instance, in a historic building in downtown Fargo, if there's any federal money or state that comes in, then there can be regulations enforced, but not in residential neighborhoods.
So if there's a disagreement with what the Historic Preservation recommends, the city commission can go over it. You could make a
Yeah, well,
recommendation.
even if the Historic Preservation Commission denied it, they wouldn't be able to enforce it unless there was federal money involved.
Thank you. Mr. Strand?
And if I might continue, I'm an old building hugger, and there's no secret about that. And one of my disappointments in our state especially is we've gutted the laws that protect historic buildings. So the more we can do on a local level to elevate that standard and that value, I believe it's a value. And yet I know there's circumstances where people can't accommodate the criteria, maybe in a constructive sense, but to lose our history is not a better alternative. And to lose our past isn't a better alternative. And even though there isn't much teeth in this, it sets the bar, and it sets the expectation that we honor our history, and we honor our past, and we honor the legacies of previous generations. And I wish we frankly could do more in that. But I appreciate your neighborhood leadership and your advocacy. And I've lived in a historic district down in South Fargo and appreciated the value of that. And I just wish we had more of this standard up here so that our history is always honored more readily, and it isn't, frankly.
Mark, you had a comment?
To help clarify a little bit, really the teeth in this ordinance is if there is not a certificate of appropriateness given, they would be unable to get a building permit.
Does that clarify it, John?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Gary. Mahoney.
Aye.
Just for the record,
Mr. Greenberg?
I grew up just one block west of Bethany, and I went to kindergarten at Jefferson.
Must be on the wall somewhere, high achiever. Item B, zoning change MR3, multiple dwelling residential to general commercial, lots 1, 2, Block 3, West Acres, 4th Edition, 1702 40th Street South, and 3926 17th Avenue South. Approval recommended by the Planning Commission on 11/6/18, first reading rezoning ordinance.
Evening, Commissioners. Donald Kress of the Department of Planning and Development. Item 37B, as the mayor has stated, is a zone change in the West Acres 4th Edition, located along 17th Avenue South and 40th Street South. This 2.07 acre property is composed of 2 lots. The surrounding zoning, the current zoning is MR3, multi-dwelling residential. As you see, much of this area is. The proposed zoning is GC general commercial, which is typical of what's along the rest of 17th Avenue South there. And across the street is the West Acres area, including the West Acres Cinema is across there. The applicant is rezoning this area to provide for new commercial development at this location. The applicant is also in the process of replatting these lots. They are now, if you want to look at it this way, running north-south. He's going to replat them so they go east-west. That plat will actually go to the Planning Commission tomorrow and probably be before your commission on a consent agenda sometime in January. Planning staff has not received any public comments regarding this project. Your packet includes a zone change ordinance prepared by the City Attorney's Office. The applicant, Nate Volmuth, is with us tonight and may wish to address the commission. Guess not. The Planning Commission's recommendation is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this rezoning? Anybody present who wishes to speak? I have a motion.
For approval?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion by the commission? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, you were just to talk us into that one. No discussion. Don Morgan just handed out this for the rest of the public to know that the 2018 holiday party is Thursday, December 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. at 611 8th Street South in Fargo. And it's a beautiful home to come by and see. So go to the City Hall open house tomorrow night and then take this in on Thursday if you would. Next item, application for golf addiction, North Dakota, doing business as golf addiction for a Class FA entertainment alcoholic beverage license at 4474 23rd Avenue South. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening again, Mayor and Commissioners. Currently, the Golf Addiction is operating with a Class I entertainment license, and they're wanting to upgrade to the FA entertainment to have full alcohol. This did go through our background check and has come to Liquor Control, comes to you with a recommendation of approval. One thing to note, they are planning on adding a different type of an event there. Like at some bars, you go and you throw darts. They're going to have axe throwing. And so it's a little bit different kind of entertainment.
And alcohol.
And alcohol, yes. And so the chief was a little bit concerned about that, and so did visit with them and feels that they do have proper safety features in place to have this activity occur concurrent with the alcohol.
You voted for that, Dave?
Axe throwing?
Is there anyone present who wishes to
yeah.
speak to this license? Is there anyone who wishes to speak? If not, we'll close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Did you want to speak? Come. You just have to walk faster.
Don't bring an axe.
Don't bring an axe.
Yeah.
Mayor, Commissioners, Council. So we've been operating in Fargo for, 5 years now, just under 5 years with the golf simulators and things like that. Moving to full liquor is more, it was a big decision for us. So we had a lot of conversations, talked with the chief of police about what that would take. And then obviously we want to throw in the axe throwing piece, which is, we see it as maybe less of a liability than the golf simulator side because they're more secure in their own lanes. Which is, it'll be a ton of fun. We've been in areas, we live in areas where this is happening, and it's a great entertainment value for the public. We get a lot of raised eyebrows.
What do they actually do?
Say that again?
What do they actually do?
So it's a hatchet. It's about a 2-foot hatchet, and you literally throw it
Sure.
forward, and it sticks into 2x6 to 2x8 construction lumber. And it's just like bullseye, so there's the more accurate you are, the different ways you can do it. It's a ton of fun, and we're skeptical, and I'm skeptical in everything, but I tried it, and we had a ton of fun, and I would do it again over and over and over again. So luckily enough, we have the opportunity to do it up in here in Fargo, and it wasn't really with the full liquor part that we were going to do it with, but it just, timing was right, and we said, let's jump into it, let's spend the money, and the full liquor piece is more or less for our patrons that are asking if we could do it for them. And obviously, there's business beneficial things to it as well, too, which is a win for, I think, both sides. So yeah, we'd like to add that to the establishment. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and we obviously love to see all you guys in there, so.
Kind of hoping you do a demonstration with Commissioner Gary, because he moves fast.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I just make one comment? I don't think it's appropriate to have commissioners' faces on the targets or the mayor. So that's the only request that
But
we
it's
have.
not illegal.
Thank you. I think we have a better understanding. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Did I get a motion?
They did.
Okay. Roll call vote?
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Garrick?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Just worried about the guys that go in there for golf and find out it's a different game. But we'll go back to Resolution 36. Ken Costin will come to this.
You have DE here for public.
Or do we have one more public? I'm sorry. Yeah, Thorlson. Hearing on dangerous building located at 703 10th Avenue North. Bruce Thorlson to explain.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners. Bruce Tarleton Inspections here on a dangerous building action for a property at 703 10th Avenue North in Fargo. First one on the agenda today with no liquor and no alcohol. So I'm going to summarize your packet because there's a lot of information on there. The front of the packet has a suggested motion I provide for your consideration at the end of this hearing. I don't believe that anybody has been living in this house for some time, approximately 10 years. One of the current owners lives out of town in Kindred, North Dakota. And everything we know points to the owner using this as sort of a storage for commercial vehicles, such as backhoes, trailers, commercial tanks, and you can see that in some of the pictures you received. The owner has told us that he was intended on fixing up this house, but we haven't seen that in any of the action to date. There have been changes to the house showing us that there is no intention for anybody living in the house, such as windows being removed and boarded up, windows which are required for building code for light and ventilation of a home. There's been leaded glass windows removed and boarded up, indicating no intention of preserving historical features of the house. No attempt for long periods of time, even though we provided notice, including leaving holes in the walls, eaves, and roof, which allowed for extensive interior damage and weather infestation and intrusion. Summarize of the timeline. This action started when we received a complaint this year in March of 2018. The complaint came to our office from a citizen who lives in the area. After the March complaint, we initially took a substandard building approach to the property due to only looking at the exterior. We sent out a notice, and with only an exterior inspection, the inspector did think there was a possibility for rehabilitation of this house. After a minor attempt at some exterior compliance, the property went back into non-compliant. Inspections then requested an interior inspection on this house. The owner would not allow us in, and we were required to get a search warrant for the house. And I want to emphasize, the search warrant takes considerable time, action from various departments and staff and the city attorney. And with the help of the city attorney, we secured a search warrant. We inspected and we learned the condition of the interior and changed our action to dangerous building action. The property has not had water, sewer, gas for approximately 10 years. There's been no heat, running water, making the building not habitable. We placarded the house on August 16th of 2018 and monitored it ever since. We extended the deadline to give the owner additional time to figure out how to deal with this property, and he has not taken any action to date. You'll see from the timeline that we provided all required notices to both owners and postings for this dangerous building action. There have been no permits on this building since For any records we have since 1988, assessors have provided us a statement of valuation that attests to the deterioration, which is one of the criteria for our actions today. We had a meeting with the two owners to try and come to a conclusion, a resolution on the property, and did not come to a resolution. We have, since there's been no action taken to date by the owner to provide resolution in the last 8 months or since our meetings, and after extensions we've come to today, I suggest you make the suggested motion, and allow inspections to act on this building. Any questions?
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak regarding to this dangerous building?
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Terry Tegmeyer. I'm the contract for deed owner of the property at 703 10th Avenue North. This is Mr. Phil Grotenhouse. He would be basically my banker. He's the one who gets my payments. I guess what we would like to talk about first, and probably thank the gentleman from SRF and the gal representing the Historic Preservation Commission. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is a home approximately, I believe, close to 100 years old. We would like to maintain and preserve what is there. The reason we haven't done anything as far as the inside repairs or anything is because we intended on taking out the old plaster and refurbishing most of the inside and then re-siding and re-shingling the outside of the roof. The foundation for the house, considering it's close to 100 years old, is about a 3-foot thick foundation out of brick, and that house sits just as solid as the day it was built. My problem I have with the Fargo building inspection is they've got people coming out there making statements that you should have a structural engineer make, and they basically had a 2-week schooling in it and declaring it just from looking from the outside that it's a dangerous structure. I think their observations are way off base. But what we would like to do, and like I said, we would seek to preserve this house and bring it back to its original or better, actually, condition than what it was. We're talking about possibly putting in a new basement into it. And the Roosevelt neighborhood has been helpful in that this used to be a rental house, and we're converting it back to a single-family home. And we are looking at applying through the Roosevelt neighborhood finance for loans that are specifically dedicated to this type of project. We think we have a good project for that.
Why is it you hadn't done anything for 10 years?
The timing wasn't quite right until this last year now. I run a construction company myself, too, so we've been just waiting for a window to open up here. We've been down, and we did talk to Mr. Charlson. He was correct. We did have a meeting with him down there, and he basically denied us any chance of getting a permit by saying that we needed to have structural engineers and electrical engineers and who knows what come down and do certifications of this structure, when all we were looking for is basically a remodel type permit, going in, putting new siding on, re-insulating. That's what we'd like to do, take the old siding off and tighten up the building with Tyvek and additional insulation. Rewire the house, because with my contacts in the construction business, I have people who can do the rewiring and bring it up to code. Same with the plumbing. We have no desire to, hobnob or shingle whatever to get a house back in shape, sort of. We want to do a nice job on this. The houses in that neighborhood, several of them have done basically the same thing, had their houses picked up, put in new foundations, new siding, new roofs, and this house fits in with basically exactly what the Historical Preservation Commission was saying. It fits the neighborhood. That's the type of houses that are out there. And that would be what we would be aiming for.
Okay. Any questions, commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Terrelson had, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Terrelson had commented that you didn't come to an agreement when you met. Can you expand a little more on that? Because I listen intently to what you're saying tonight. I look at the facts, I look at the timelines, and what you're saying doesn't compute with me as one commissioner.
Yep.
And so if you could share a little more detail why you wouldn't agree and come up with a better option to satisfy at least one commissioner's understanding of the situation. Because what you've said hasn't articulated any type of a plan, and if you look at these pictures, this is in pretty tough shape.
On the
And
inside,
so I
yeah,
say you're going to
there's-
bring it up to code, and when you look at the foundation alone, anyway, please.
And yeah, and I think I addressed that we were looking at putting in a new foundation, basically rehabbing the whole structure. We want to maintain the looks and the appeal of it because it has all the oak woodwork on the inside, the oak, solid oak flooring in there, the pocket doors, oak sliding pocket doors, French provincial doors on the inside. I don't imagine you look any
Well,
pictures
sir,
of
but
those.
if I may, based on the question about what you couldn't agree to, we've had other situations here, 2 weeks ago, I believe, where a decision was made to meet, compromise was worked out, the owners came in and said, would you be willing to work with us if we did this? You haven't said any of that. You said, well, our intent. And so give me some specifics. You're going to start construction next week? You're going to start on February 1st? What is it you're going to do, not talk about?
As soon as we can get a building permit, we would start construction, rehabbing it, probably start with the reshingling the roof. But we have not been able to acquire or secure a building permit with the obstacles that they put in the way. They basically tried to fast-track this house and get rid of it. They seem to have some sort of a campaign against older buildings in this area. There's another house just a block to the north of there, which was recently placarded too, another older historic home. I don't know whose it is, but we saw the placarding.
The commission actually has a campaign to get rid of houses that aren't taken care of, so it's not just our inspection department. They've been instructed by the commissioners that houses are in neglect. This is at least 10 years. There's a lot of records that you haven't done much on it. So yeah, the commissioners are going to do that. Commissioner Pepcorn.
Mr. Chairman, so do you know we can see the pictures? Do you see the pictures that they have of what it looks like? Can you pull those up, Bruce, or can we have somebody pull them up? So anyway, you're talking about preserving historic preservation. There's nothing left to preserve. This thing is destroyed. We can see the pictures if you want to come see. I mean, they took pictures of the whole thing. When you talk about oak floors, the floors are ruined. You can see the ceiling has dropped. So what are you talking about? And you've let it sit for 10 years, and now you say we haven't had time. That's a little bit hard for us to stomach. So anyway.
I don't see anything yet, so I can't answer to anything.
You'll put it
Well,
up.
but I mean, we can see the pictures of what it looks like. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Well-
It's wrecked. It's a dump.
You can take pictures of certain areas that you want to, show and not show the rest of the building itself.
But the ceiling has dropped.
Where is the ceiling? There is a spot where I know what you're talking about. There's.
No, the whole house. I mean, come on. I mean,
But we're rehabbing the whole interior, so it doesn't matter. It would be, that portion of it would all be gutted out anyway, and
so you've
especially,
had 10 years, but that's not quite enough time.
what has not been on our schedule to do it until this year. Circumstances have not made it so.
So how do you think your neighbors feel about that?
We have not had any complaints from any of the neighbors. We asked about the complaint, and they told me it was an anonymous complaint, and they couldn't give any record as to where it came from.
So just look at the pictures. To me, that speaks more than 1,000 words when you look at that. It's awful. Isn't it?
I can't even tell where some of these pictures are taken. I mean, they're black and white, and
We're not going to get into debate tonight. You've answered the commissioner's question. Commissioner Gerg, do you have a question?
So Terry, I think what we're all looking for is a timeline. If you were to get a permit, and I don't know what that would take, you're saying you would start work immediately.
Yep.
So is there a compromise to be made on that at all? Are we able to work with that?
Probably start with a roofing. Pardon?
I think they're asking an engineer's evaluation. Excuse you for a minute. We'll have Bruce come back, please. Thank you.
Like we did with the other families, hey, if you start working with us, we'll start working with you type of deal.
So a little on the dangerous building ordinance. What that does is give you an opportunity to have a home go back to full compliance. So that's what you're looking at. If you give a little permit for a piece and a part, you're delaying the inevitable. How far do you go? So what we do is we go ask for full compliance. We want engineering. We want somebody that, with some experience, to look at this property and tell us what needs to happen. That's what the owner's told to do. Electrical, mechanical, and plumbing. What needs to happen to bring this up to code? We usually ask for engineering. With these owners, we backed up and said, you can get a licensed contractor to go in, tell us what needs to be done. That's what they were told.
And is that because of the cost? Is there a cost associated with that?
It's because of the 50% assessors. It allows us to do that. And bring us something, we've seen nothing.
So then
We did discuss the engineering aspect of the home. He wanted to do his own. And in the building code world, we look for third-party independent inspection of a building to give us the answers.
Just for the commissioners, Bruce, would you please tell me the 3 criteria that he'd have to do in order to remodel this home?
It's engineering, building, mechanical, plumbing, and electric.
And that would come back to you and say yes or no, or would it come back to the commission?
And really the big deal is the structural analysis of the house. Can it be saved? We're dealing with another one. 2 structural engineers have gone into that other one and said they won't. So we just need somebody to say something to us. This building can be repaired.
Sure.
Structurally.
Thank you. So Terry,
And all the rest can be taken care of. Mechanical, electric, plumbing, that can be done.
so Terry, are you willing to do that in a short time frame?
He wants us to bring in a structural engineer, and then an electrical engineer, and then a plumbing and whatever
I think he said licensed contractor.
engineer.
Licensed contractor, yeah.
I am a licensed contractor,
Okay.
so,
But you can't give the opinion. You can't give an opinion on your
Yeah,
own
I know.
house.
I've been
That's-
denied
Somebody
that.
else gives an opinion. So if you're not willing to have somebody else to do it, then we're going to condemn the building. If you're willing to go along with the building department, then we will allow you some time to work that out. We'll declare it a dangerous building, and you will still have time to work it out with our department. If you're unable to do that, the house will be taken down.
yeah, no, I can get another contractor to come in and take a look at it and basically to say, what's what there.
So what I'm trying to do is give you a lifeline. If you can do that within the next 2 weeks to a month, I'm willing to give you that rope.
Okay.
But if you're not, then I'm not willing to give you that rope. And I think that the commissioners are probably leaning towards not as well. So what we want to do is get a warm, fuzzy feeling that you will bring this back to us very, very soon and say, hey, I'm moving towards the right direction here. We'll readdress it at that point. Okay? If you're willing to say that you're going to do that, 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
Yep.
I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to say, let's do that and save this.
My question is, now this building is placarded and it says no admittance or anything. Now, does that me and my contractor too, or what? Where are we at there?
We always allow the owner admittance into their own property. That has to happen. They are taking responsibility for structural engineers that need to go in and look at it.
Okay,
So Bruce, let's go back one more time. Your expectation tonight, if we declare it a dangerous building, he still could have the possibility of rebuilding his home.
Those stipulations are on the dangerous building order, so it could be the same. Engineering,
So if he
Or
comes
structure.
compliant with your rules,
Yep.
and they say he could build it, then he could have the opportunity to build it.
that's what's gone on for the last 8 months.
Yeah, and if he doesn't do that, then we would tear it down 2 months, 3 months?
With facts and finding, the owner does have a 30-day appeal period.
So just to be clear, if you were to approve the suggested motion, which includes approving the findings of fact, there's no longer really an opportunity to rebuild at that point, because that order that goes along with the findings of fact says either you destroy it within 30 days or thereafter the city will destroy it. But the order doesn't contemplate any kind of rebuilding. So if you want to do a rebuilding, and Bruce, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you want to allow the rebuilding, I think you just continue this matter for however long.
Exactly.
And then we'll come back and address findings at that point and this suggested motion.
Mr. Strand?
Is that right, Bruce?
That's true. Since there was an attorney involved early on in this one, our attorney was involved also. So the findings in fact are already completed on this property.
Mr. Strand?
Do you have financing in place?
Yes.
to do this project, and how much?
Well, we're working also,
How much have you projected the cost is to bring this building up to being
Well-
to standard and habitable?
probably close to 100,000.
And you have that financing in place?
Well, with the application that we'll be putting in with the Roosevelt neighborhood and our own financing, I don't think it will be a problem.
But it's not in place yet?
No, it's not in place yet because we've been battling as to whether or not we were going to be allowed to do anything. We've been denied getting any permits so far. That's the reason nothing has happened.
I guess the question I'm wrestling with is, after all this time, why are we at the 11th hour with your appeal to try get us to hear you that you want to improve the house?
Well,
After 10 years?
we actually didn't think there was a problem, that we had a notice to fix some stuff last fall, and we fixed everything that they asked for. And then 2 months later, we were kind of surprised with this placarding that it was a dangerous house.
It hasn't been habitable, it hasn't had utilities, hasn't had heat,
No, it was a
water?
rental property before that, and it was
Before
when we...
2008 then, or?
I don't even recall. No, it's been, what is it?
When did I sell it?
I guess
99, 2000.
my thinking is if you showed up tonight and you said, listen, I've got the financing in place, I've got the contractors in place, I've got these agreements ready to implement, but I don't know that that's the case. You're talking about a neighborhood initiative application, which can, who knows how much time that takes?
My problem with this whole program is that I was called by a Brandon Raboyne, who is a Realtor in town here, and he told me about this stuff, and he had been talking to Bill Thompson from the Building Inspection Department that they were interested in this property, and Bill Thompson told him, well, I need to get a complaint before I can move forward on any of this. This happened prior to any placarding or anything else. It was shortly after that, because that's why we were so surprised that they had placarded, and we had already done all the work that they had asked for prior to that.
So if you had 2 weeks and you were told to come in and assure us you have the financing to move immediately, could you do that in 2 weeks?
I don't know how fast they will go through on the Roosevelt neighborhood end of it. That I'm not sure of. Would they do it in 2 weeks? When you go out financing stuff, a lot of times it takes a good 30 days on something like that.
We'll close public hearing. Do I have a motion from the commission?
I'm gonna move.
One more.
I close public hearing. We've heard enough. You both have talked. You've had your opportunity. You had, your partner talked, okay? It's not going to change the discussion.
So I'm not sure this is really aligned to have to be a motion or not, but I would move that point one, we provide 30 days, if you will, but the first commission meeting in January, that we have a substantial plan in place and the structural engineers report, and that the project owners work with the city to identify the steps required to save this house. But beyond the first meeting in January, if it's not in a format that Mr. Terrelson and his leadership and his team represents to the commission, then I won't support it.
So you're looking to continue until the first January meeting with that contingency? I second that.
You second? Eric, you have something?
Just wondering if I might suggest that the hearing not be closed, that the hearing also be continued to, if that's what you intend to do, to that
Thank
first
you. I
mean,
mean,
in
clearly.
January. That way we don't have to republish and reserve.
Just to clarify Commissioner Garrick's about financing, but it's more about engineering and structural. And as the next step, as I see
To
it.
clarify the motion is?
Continue the public hearing to the regularly scheduled meeting of the City Commission, 5:15 PM on January 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
Mayor, if I might, Mr. Tarleton, would that work? Let's say they came in January 2nd and showed us that they had the plan in place, they had the contractors in place, they had the financing in place, and that their intention and timeline was to do this. Is that doable or not? Okay. I guess my thinking is that if you don't show us the wherewithal to do this project, you're not going to get past first base. with this commission in light of the history that's in front of us. But my sense of this commission is if you can show us that you can finance it, you can get it done, you can make it habitable, you can make it an urgent priority, and that it's going to unfold in an extremely quick, timely fashion,
That's my understanding.
then we could get on the same page, if you folks can do that.
Would your comment change any of this discussion? Or we just said you want to verify, maybe you'll try to get to what they need done?
You're talking to me?
Yep. You had wanted to speak, and I don't, if it's
Okay.
going to verify.
The reason I wanted to speak is because I bought the house in the early 90s.
Phil, you want to use the microphone, please?
Move over the microphone.
I bought the house in the early 90s. I bought it from the former building building head of inspection here in Fargo. Okay, and I sold it to Terry about the year 2000. And for about 16, 17 years, all the paperwork from inspections went to Terry. Last year, for some reason, it changed. It came to me. I had no idea why. Pretty soon I got a bill. Later I got a bill for an inspection. Now, I do not have possession of that property. I am like the bank. It's like a mortgage, contract for deed. Why am I getting these notices? Why am I getting the bill? And I've asked various people in the city here, I've disputed the bill, and I've not gotten an answer. And this is part of the confusion. I get the statements, Terry hasn't got them. He hasn't gotten the information most of the time.
Who owns the title in the house?
Title is in Mr. And Mrs. Groton, who's as trustees of a living trust, the Groton Hoose Living Trust, subject to recorded contract for deed in favor of Mr. Techmeyer.
Oh, it's a contract for deed.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a contract for deed.
So under the International Building Code, which is our city ordinance by reference, the owner would actually be both of them, have an ownership interest. And in dangerous building matters, I mean, if there were, let's just say there was a bank out there that also had a mortgage against the premises, the idea would be to notify them of this dangerous building proceeding as well. Regardless of whether the bill is here or not, the issue is whether the building should be ordered destroyed or not. Obviously, these two individuals have an interest in whether the building is destroyed. I think the city has this building.
But I thought a contract for deed, it comes back to the owner if the contract for deed guy walks away.
Right, and still comes back to Mr. Groton, who's.
But they,
his wife
since they have the
trustees.
contract legally, that's what ties them.
Right.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye, thank you. Go to Resolution 36, resolution authorizing the issuance of $15 million refunding improvement bond, Series 2018F, and resolution creating funds for improvement districts, provided for and appropriating special assessments for the support and maintenance of said funds, and authorizing the issuance of improvement warrants thereon. Ken Costin to explain this is a good program by the state of North Dakota and gets its bonds at a much lower rate.
Yeah, good evening, Commissioners. The Finance Committee is very pleased to present this loan application to you. If you flash back a couple of legislative sessions, your staff has provided legislative testimony about the need of constant demands for infrastructure funding and financing for the city of Fargo and other communities across the state. So we have been actively lobbying alternative programs to fund this infrastructure. During the last session, the legislature did adopt a loan program which offers financing at 2% for terms up to 30 years, low-interest loans, if you will, for infrastructure financing. So at the staff level, if you recall earlier this past year, we did issue bonds, but we did pull off a sizable amount of projects. There's 24 projects included in this loan, if you will, and the lion's share of those projects have to do with reconstruction of infrastructure. And so we pulled them off, and we didn't bond them at the time because there was a lot of dialogue forthcoming with regard to special assessments. that dialogue is happening right now, and it continues to happen and probably will for the next couple of months. And so with that, I mean, we obviously have the need to continue to fuel the Treasury and to close on this transaction, and we'd like to do that before the end of the year. So it's a $15 million loan, very flexible terms. With regard to the assessments of the 24 projects that are listed here, I think there's about 5 or 6 where the assessments have actually been levied from your past actions, and the other assessments will be making their way through the process sometime, probably likely the first quarter of next year, when the projects for the work that are completed this year will be done. We purposely wrote the warrant language in the agreement, which has to do with the rate on the assessments, not to exceed 1.5%, which is the state law provision, because there's still some uncertainty about what the markup would be on the final decision of this commission. And so right now, the ones that have been levied at 1% over. Again, because the assessments aren't completed yet, we're not positive. But long story short, this is an excellent deal. We believe it's a result of continuous lobbying efforts on behalf of many people across the state to try to open up some alternative financing options for cities. Normally at this time, Terry Heaton from Springstead would be standing here telling you that we've received bids from the private market. You would maybe get 6 to 8 bids of people competitively bidding on City of Fargo's book of business, and you would award the sale award to the lowest bidder. Under today's market conditions, it might be somewhere in the neighborhood of north of 4%, maybe 4.1% or right around 4%. So this is essentially half-price financing. Very good deal, but I just wanted to explain to you the nuances about the assessments that will ultimately be attached to this document, and would ask for your approval so we can close the loan. And
This is basically get the loan. We haven't assessed specials at this point, so it wouldn't be specialed out yet.
Correct.
Have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions of Ken? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Garrick?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 38, you have my recommendation for the Board of Health. Chelsea Lynn Mattern is recommended for taking a term of 3 years. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Strand?
Yes.
Garrick?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. 39, recommendation to retain lobbyists for 2019 legislative session. Mike Redlinger to explain.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. On October 22nd, the Commission approved a request for proposals process for government relations and legislative advocacy for the upcoming session. At our RFP deadline, we had 3 responsive proposals that were received, and we interviewed those proposers last week utilizing a standard question set. I included that in your packet just for reference. Following this screening process, it was our unanimous recommendation of the screening committee to recommend, again, John M. Olson to continue in his services for the City of Fargo. Also asked the city attorney just to take a look at the legislative council agreement that's in your packet, just to make sure that that looked okay and consistent with our policy and procedures. And we're recommending that we proceed with the services agreement with John. We had a very good phone conversation with John. I know he's looking forward to getting started and continuing his work with Fargo as the session gets underway.
Any questions of Mike? Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
No.
Garrick?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 40, recommendation for agreement, purchase, leaseback, and easement for the preference of employment solutions as possible future expansion of 26th Avenue West, 42nd Street. Jim Gilmore to explain.
This purchase would be in case we ever need to build 26th Avenue west of 42nd Street. It also allows us some access control to preference personnel. The original building plan, they were going to have a driveway real close to 42nd where there wouldn't have been much stacking room, and because it was a private street, it wasn't covered by the land development code. We worked with Preference to actually buy a 40-foot strip. We've took into account the fact that there was an easement there and the access controls. There's a private road that goes in there, not really private, it's the Park District Road. Under this agreement, we would be leasing it back, we're giving him an easement. That way the city does not have to be responsible for maintenance of that street. So the recommendation is to approve the purchase for $69,707.50. We have a tax increment financing district that's in that area, and public facilities are an eligible activity, and so the Finance Committee is recommending we use funds from that tax increment financing district for this purchase. Do you have any questions?
Any questions by the commissioners? Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Guess it got a little slow. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll go on to the updated capital improvement. That'll give Brenda time to get all ready and getting juiced up for this presentation. And we have one other analysis tonight, too. Thank you. 5 minutes. We'll call the meeting back to order. I've got Brenda all geared up for this. She's going to do a good job. Brenda Darian's going to explain the CIP. And just to explain the commissioners, we were anticipating that they would kind of go through this the last time it was explained to you, but Bruce Grubb has helped them tune it up a little better and hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you might have been thinking about. So we'll go through our capital improvement plan, and I ask you as commissioners, ask any questions you want, because I want you to truly understand how our engineering team comes up with the CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present our CIP for 2019, our recommended CIP, and also give you a little bit of background of how we come to our recommendation. So within our 2019 CIP, we wanted to, I apologize.
Brenda, can I do one thing?
Yep.
The Boy Scouts have got their credit for this meeting. This is just really a staff introduction, and if the guys did want to go, you could leave. I know you have to have a certain amount of time. We're well over time for your team here, so, and I'm sure Brenda will continue to go. So if they'd like to leave, that's fine.
Are the commissioners allowed to go with the Boy Scouts?
No.
Okay, I don't think I'm any longer amped up for this. As you can see on our proposed CIP, we did remove the water main replacement projects to address the funding shortage resulting from that reinstating of the 2013 infrastructure funding policy. So one of the things we wanted to do is take a look back at the history of our CIP. And so we went back to 2015 to take a look at our annual CIP for the last 4 years. And so looking at that, a couple of things I'd like to point out to you is when you look at the water and the street area section, you can tell going from 2015 to 2016, the increase in the water main replacement projects. 2016 is when we started following that SRF loan that brought the new interceptor sewer up to the wastewater treatment plant. So those years we had some increases in our water main replacement projects, and you can see that jump that we had there. Then what we did is we wanted to take out the new development because that's really not a project that we can recommend. They're all developer driven. And so that brings down what that CIP looks like. We wanted to take it one step further. So what we looked at is, okay, what do we in the engineering group actually regulate as part of our CIP? So what we did in this slide is we took out the new development and the alley paving projects. Alley paving projects, they have to request those, the adjacent properties, and then we complete those projects. So that brings our CIP down to, pre-flood. So the next step we did one more step, which is taking out the flood projects that we've been doing since 2009 that's part of the flood protection plan. And so when you take a look at what engineering is regulating as far as the maintenance of the roadways, sidewalk, traffic, storm, we're bringing those costs down to the actual maintenance and maintaining of our infrastructure. With that, I'm going to have Tom come up and discuss the factors that we look at when we're looking at doing our pavement restoration and selecting our projects moving forward.
Good evening. Like Brenda said, there are a lot of different factors that go into our decision-making when we propose a capital improvement plan. So some of those factors are pavement condition index, water main break history, and just the general age of the infrastructure. Street lights and traffic signal needs, increases in average daily traffic, so capacity needs certainly play a part of that. Flood control needs, a lot of coordination with Public Works. Work closely with Public Works throughout the year. A big part of that is to determine what roads they're having issues with, how we can make improvements to reduce their expense and maintenance and address the complaints that they get from the public as well. Likewise, a lot of coordination with planning, try to determine where that redevelopment is going to come and if there are infrastructure needs to, that are needed to support that redevelopment. So one of the big things, pavement condition index, every 4 years we go out, we hire a consultant to perform a pavement condition survey. They use an ASTM standard to assign a rating, 0 meaning failed, 100 meaning brand new. This survey information is then imported in our pavement management software, and then it aids us in the selection of our capital improvement plan. Our most recent survey was performed in 2016. So coming from that, we get a pavement condition score, and then just kind of high level, the range, and then a typical description, what you could anticipate in that pavement, the remaining life, if no maintenance was done to it, and then what typical procedures you would do to that roadway to extend the life of that pavement. So this just kind of shows where we are as a city. So this matrix, if you look at all streets, the total network, we average an 82.98 pavement condition index, and that rates in that category of very good. So it's important to understand what those different things mean. You can see that there are some areas where we categorize as excellent. A lot of it is very good, which is great. Some in good, and then we move some areas into fair to marginal or poor. So again, if we look at what that actually looks like, so here's 40th Avenue South. The pavement condition index in 2016 was rated at a 95. And so that's really close to where our average concrete arterial roadway rates in the city of Fargo. On average, we rate a 94.38, and here's an example of a 95. So that's what you see when you get an average concrete arterial roadway in the city of Fargo. So we look at Prairie Wood Drive South. That has a score of 82, which we'd categorize as a very good. And again, this is right around that average of what a typical asphalt local roadway is in the city of Fargo. So you can see there's some distressing going on, some longitudinal cracking. Those are all the types of things that they look at to really give us that condition index. Just a reminder too, pavement condition index measures the amount of distress in a pavement, not ride quality. We do track that separate, but it's not part of the pavement condition index. Next page, First Avenue North. So this is a composite arterial roadway. Our network average is 67.54 on that, and this is an example of a roadway that scored a 67 and kind of falls in that category of good. Again, as you see, we're seeing more distress in that pavement. More maintenance is needed to maintain that at a higher level. This is an example of a composite collector roadway. Our network average is a 44.74. Here's an example of a roadway, 3rd Avenue North, that ranks a 46 on a PCI score and falls into that fair to marginal. So then what's a poor roadway? So anything below a 40 usually falls into the reconstruction zone. You would spend more money on trying to rehab or preserve this roadway than to just replace it. So it falls into a poor. Here's an example of a 31, which is, it's a 35th Avenue South. Our typical local concrete roadway falls in at a 76.87, but this roadway here is at 31. So like I said, all that information goes into our pavement management software. As part of that 2016 pavement condition survey, we also asked our consultant to perform some funding scenarios for our pavement network. We asked them to look at 3 scenarios: maintain our current pavement condition index, or increase it by 5 points and then maintain it there, or allow it to drop by 5 points and then maintain it there. We just wanted to understand what it would take to increase or decrease or stay as status quo. So this was the scenario of maintain our current PCI. It showed that an average funding would average out to $15.5 million a year. Just for reference, we spent about $8.3 million in 2018. Our proposed CIP is spending $12.1 million. So we are falling slightly below that recommended level with our proposed CIP. Sorry, too many PCIs and CIPs. And so this scenario was to increase our PCI by 5 points. It shows a large investment in the first couple of years, and then it kind of maintains at that level, as you would expect. So that averaged to be $17.3 million in that scenario. And then what would it be if we allowed our PCI to drop by 5 points and then maintain? You see in years 1 and 2, you spend nothing, and then you do kind of have to spend more in the following years to just maintain at that level. So if you recall in a few slides ago, the average required funding level to maintain was 15.5. So this does decrease that, but you do let all your roads drop by approximately 5 points to save that $400,000 a year. So more of the factors we look at, water main break history is certainly a factor. We track all of these. Public Works tracks all these and shares that information with us. We work with GIS to plot it out on a City of Fargo map. So this just shows North Fargo from 2010 through 2017 break locations. And then this is more the core of the downtown, older part of town. Everything in red is a cast iron pipe. That's where we're seeing most commonly, most of our breaks are happening in cast iron pipe. We currently have about 45 miles remaining of cast iron pipe. A lot of that pipe is 80 to 100 plus years old and showing a lot of distress. Again, another factor is just working with Public Works. So every year they come out with their 12 worst roadways, and they kind of look at pavement condition, and then they also look at those that are paving and water main. So these really come from where their issues are, where they're having a lot of breaks, where they're spending a lot of maintenance dollars to try to maintain our existing infrastructure. So this slide's a little busy, but I'll try to walk through it with you. We'll take the line water main on here. So City of Fargo has 540 miles of water main. If you anticipated a life expectancy of 100 years of that pipe on average, that means we'd need to replace 5.4 miles every year. In 2018, we replaced 2.3 miles. So we fell short of that goal by about 3 miles. And what that means is that rather than the 100 years of expected life, we need to get 232 years of life out of every water main in the City of Fargo at the current replacement rate we're at. So this slide, it's mismarked up here, but this is for 2019. If we look at another line, pavement, the very bottom line, pavement, concrete, and asphalt. So that's all of our pavement network combined. So we have about 9.2 million square yards of pavement. If you factor in estimating 80-year life on concrete pavement with rehabilitation strategies throughout the years and 50 years in asphalt, it averages to 63 years. So on average, we want to try to get 63 years out of our pavement. Some's going to be more, some is going to be less. But to do that 63 years, we need to replace 147,000 square yards every year. In 2019, again, it's mislabeled, 2019, we're proposing to replace 74,385 square yards. So what that means is our pavement needs to last 124 years rather than 63 years that we think is probably closer to what it'll actually hold up. So those are all the factors that we look at when developing a capital improvement plan. So now we'll kind of get into some of the projects that we've selected and why we select those. So like I said, pavement preservation is a huge part of what we do. Pavement preservation is just a proactive approach of implementing low-cost preventative maintenance treatments to extend the life of the pavement. Of course, no pavement will last forever, but with timely applications, we can extend the life, resulting in cost savings. So again, number of studies have been done. You know, the first 40% of pavement life has about a 15% drop in quality, but the next 15% of that life has about a 40% drop in quality. Number of studies, you know, so if you spend that dollar where it's dropped 15% quality, you probably delay cost of about $8 equivalent if you let it drop that next next 40% over 15% of the pavement life. Seen a number of studies that range from about $6 to $14, but most kind of fall in at that $8. So this is what we try to do. You let that pavement deteriorate a little bit, and then you do a rehab strategy to pull that pavement condition back up, and then it starts to fall again, and you try to pick it up. So those timely applications of rehabilitation really extend the life and save the city money in the long run. So these are our pavement preservation projects that we're proposing for next year. A lot of those end up being asphalt crack seals, spot repairs throughout the city. Again, that's something we work with Public Works on addressing those areas. We'll do more larger scale concrete rehabilitation projects, seal coat projects, wear course projects, and mill and overlay projects all fall into this category. That'll turn it back over to Brenda.
So the next category that we look at is our federal aid projects. And these projects typically come out of the long-range transportation plan that's completed at MetroCog, and they do that every 5 years. So we are still building projects out of their 2014 long-range transportation plan, and then they will be doing the next one in around 2019 for the next 5 years. So the map that comes out of their long-range transportation plan looks like this. It addresses the arterials and collectors that we would be moving forward with our federal aid project requests. Some of the different federal funding buckets that we look at is we have the urban roads funds. That allows us to request any of our arterials and collectors. The regional highway funds are only used for the regional highways that go through town, the main avenue, the university. And then we've also got a number of other federal program grant funds that we can request. We've got the Urban Grants Program, the Transportation Alternatives, Recreational Trail Program, the Special Roads Fund, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and then the final one is the Rail Safety Funds. So we're able to look at all of those different funding buckets and make requests in all of them. The request to the North Dakota DOT, so our request for this year was actually made 5 years ago. So the Main Avenue project that we're doing this summer and 52nd Avenue were previously requested. And so our 2018 projects that are being requested will be constructed in 2013. So really when we look at our CIP, that's the staple. It doesn't move, we're getting federal money. So you always start with those federal aid projects and build your capital improvement plan around that. The next is our arterial roadway projects. We don't have any budgeted for this year, but I did want to talk about it a little bit is, you know, how does a roadway even be designated as an arterial? because we have North Broadway, which is an arterial, and we have 45th Street, which is an arterial. So you go from a 2-lane to a 6-lane roadway, but they are both arterials. And arterials are the streets that we rely on to move us throughout the city. The city and MetroCog do work with the North Dakota DOT on that designation, and the North Dakota DOT does require an official map by the cities designating which are collectors and arterials, which makes those streets eligible for the federal aid. Unfortunately, there's not enough money in the federal aid to be able to pay for all of our reconstruction of arterials and collectors. And so sometimes we'll see the construction and reconstruction necessary where we use assessments and sales tax monies. And so those are typically due to city growth, roadway capacity reasons, some worn out infrastructure, or there could be other reasons, whether it's flood control or a water or sewer utility project. The next area is our flood protection projects. These are the projects that are from the approved 2016 revised comprehensive plan. They're constructed upon the completion of the necessary properties and easement acquisitions. They complement and are necessary for the proposed 100-year flood with the diversion in place. And those projects are paid by the flood sales tax. And we're looking at about 19 million in those projects for 2019, 19.5 million. The storm sewer utility projects, they work with the storm sewer televising system that Public Works manages, televising all of our storm sewer infrastructure. Typically, our projects start with Public Works identifying areas and needs in the rehabilitation. So they may start with a street or a structure failure. And once we see one failure or they see one or two, we start getting the video camera in there, and Public Works will go through and expand that area. So one of the areas that we will be working on this summer is in the vicinity of Cashwise, south of 13th, west of 25th Street. It started with a road failure. They got in, started televising the structures and the pipe, and the project's bigger than just a couple of areas of repair. And so we turn those into projects the next year to help make those repairs on those large projects. The storm sewer utility also works on the outfall repairs, and we do some minor drain slide failures, and then also our lift station rehabilitation and reconstruction. So back in 2011, we had KLJ do a comprehensive lift station evaluation. They identified deficiencies, looked at the age, condition, capacity, failure impacts, and then they did a lift station condition rating. And so from that study, we were able to assemble a 5-year capital improvement plan for our stormwater lift stations. We also coordinate that with the flood protection plan, and then also adding pumps to lift stations that only have a single pump, which makes them more vulnerable. So if the single pump goes out, we don't have a backup. All the new lift stations, we have 2 pumps in them, so we do have a backup in case there is a pump failure. And then we also work with Public Works on their maintenance repair reports. So this year, we're looking at almost a $2 million storm sewer utility projects. The traffic and streetlight projects, they keep up their existing components running and to modify or operate differently. So what we do on those projects typically is we'll do some LED signal head replacement. Those are replaced about every 10 years. And then also what's new in operations. There's always new techniques coming in. For instance, the flashing yellow left turn arrows. We've been able to upgrade some of the intersections with those to help improve the traffic analysis there. And so when those become available, we like to incorporate them into our CIP and be able to make those improvements. We'll also do some traffic signals and crosswalk devices occasionally throughout the city. And then we're also upgrading our existing streetlights to LED fixtures. So this year on our traffic and streetlight projects, we've got a total of $5.5 million. New developments, as we talked about, those are developer-driven. The bold projects are the ones that have been requested. We haven't completed the plans yet, so we don't have engineers' estimates yet on those. So all those numbers are proposed and estimated. Sidewalk projects that we do, they're determined mostly by complaints and compliance. So there are areas in new development areas that sidewalks did not get installed, and typically we receive complaints and then we compile a list, and those are the ones that go out for the following year. And that's also in the reconstruction sidewalks. A lot of those are based off of complaints, trip hazards, those types of things. And then we do have some miscellaneous projects. We try and do some tree planting projects along the arterials. We also do have issue with some frozen water services. So we try to bite off some of those and take care of some of those and get that number of frozen water services down every year. We also look at sewer lining projects. We've got a 19th Avenue water main loop that we need to get that across the interstate so we can loop that system up there with the new industrial construction going on up there. And then we also work with a public information coordinator services that help us with some of our larger projects. The smaller projects we take care of internally, but there's some of those larger projects that we look for assistance, making sure that we can keep the public as up to date with the construction as we can. And then we also have the 40th Avenue. There's some bridge maintenance going on this year, and Clay County will be the lead, but we will have some participation in that. And then the final is some miscellaneous repairs for approximately $4 million.
Question?
I got a couple questions, if you don't mind. Do you mind going back and talking a little bit? So in 2020, there will be a census, and so with MetroCog, we're going to reach a trip threshold that now we go to the DOT, and then they give us the money. And so so it'll be in 2021 probably. Then it will be, if you don't mind talking about that, how it goes. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking, and then I don't really know what I'm talking about. Thank you.
200,000 people, is it?
I will do the best I can.
Right.
There will be a point, and they think it's about 2021, 2022 about. Today, we make our requests for our federally funded projects to the North Dakota DOT, and they select the projects that they want to fund. At that point, we will have triggered at a census that request will now take course in the MetroCog within, I think it's their policy board. And so they will be reviewing the projects for each municipality and distributing the money at the MetroCog level. And so it will no longer be distributed at the DOT level because we have hit that population number.
But before Commissioner Pepcarn, you might explain Cheyenne Avenue came up or Cheyenne Street came up as a big thing in West Fargo. You guys changed priorities a little bit to allow that to go first because of the growth they had south of there. So we did that locally, but this way going forward, we'll have more control.
Absolutely. And so just to describe it, so the MetroCog, they have a priority list with Moorhead and West Fargo and Horace, and so there's a priority list that everyone works on, and we work together. It's a great board and all that, but in the past, then our recommendation would go to the DOT. Well, now it would stay there, and the money comes to us, and then it's distributed with our discretion. So it'll be a big change, and so there's more responsibility, I guess. That's the.
Yep. Commissioner Grinberg, you had some questions about the CIP. Does this explain it?
It's very, very well done. Just a comment, but nice job. It really puts a perspective into the analysis and the detail that goes into planning.
Mr. Strand?
Thank you. Brenda, I'm just curious, today the community's hearing the news of the increased costs for the diversion. And of course, aspects of that come through the city and through our engineering departments. And a year ago, when we were wrapping up the governor's leadership meetings to come up with a new Plan B, there were some significant changes, the levels of water going through town and so on. Does this plan reflect those changes?
Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Sorry. That's why I bring my division engineers. No, it doesn't. So if you look at the projects we have on the flood, they're still off the 2016 comprehensive plan. And so, but those levels do allow for the 37 through town.
Well, we've shut down because of the injunction, right, Nathan? But we'll kick it in if that junction goes
Yeah,
away.
that's correct. So we're still actively working on our 2016 revised comp plan. Those are the projects you saw being proposed for next year. The 37-foot ones that you heard back in July, we haven't carried forward those at all yet due to not knowing whether or not we're going to get a permit from the Minnesota DNR. So once we hopefully get that permit from the DNR here in the next 4 to 6 weeks, then we'll start carrying forward those other projects. And if some of those are at the point where we can construct this year, then we'll have to bring those projects to you guys individually for approval.
So do we not have a sense of what those impacts would be if they were implemented?
Yeah, no, we absolutely know what projects would have to be done. We're just not carrying forward them today yet because we don't have the permit yet.
So at some point, we'll get apprised of what that will look like, and
Yeah, that's what we talked back in July in that informational meeting, what those projects were.
Although that's funded by the Diversion Authority, John, so our CIP is a little bit separate from that, although we do have it as joint projects. So.
Yeah, but those will be projects led by the city of Fargo, not the Diversion Authority.
Any other questions? Thorough discussion, very well done. I think your crew can do a good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So what does it mean if I'm driving, Tom, along the street? When is it that my cup of coffee doesn't spill if it's an open cup? Is it at 78 or 82 or 85?
Remember, pavement condition index is distress, not ride. So they do not correlate.
But the truth of the matter, if we don't maintain, we have a ear cost at the end. So it's trying to strike the balance that doesn't have as much impact what you can do. Like you said that one time, if you can extend it by quite a bit. So it's really a balance that the city has to have. Truth of the matter, in the state of North Dakota, Fargo is probably one better maintained cities. Is that correct, with our streets and byways?
I agree.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Strand.
I'm just curious, when we're looking at some of these life expectancies, it would appear we're kicking the can down the road, and these like my mom would say, these chickens will come home to roost. There's going to be a time where they're on our table, and any delays we have in infrastructure improvements are going to be in front of us. Do we have a sense of prioritizing or urgencies, or how do we not get ourselves so that future generations are over the barrel and it's unaffordable? I'm concerned. I'm just concerned about the delayed maintenances and the implications of delayed maintenances, because deferred maintenances, because costs will go up. And what's your best advice on that? If we had the magic wand and you could just do it the way you should and could, because would we get rid of all that extended, would we just keep everything current for maintenance?
Well, I'll let Tom jump in too if he wants. This slide isn't the sky is falling, but there is a reason we need to do the projects that we do to keep ahead of that issue. And so I think we are beyond a lot of other cities. There's a lot of cities that don't have a water main replacement program. So they haven't even started replacing any of their cast iron water main. And so we actually are ahead of a lot of cities by what we've done today. But we do need to continue. because, we're also seeing breaks in our asbestos pipe. And so we know once we tackle the cast iron replacement, we need to go to the asbestos. And then, as far as even with the pavement, we build the roads with the best information we had at that time. And over the years, we've learned better ways to make our roadways last longer and to be able to get much longer life out of them. So we are having to go into some of the older roadways to get them up to those new design requirements so that they can last a long time. I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, so like Brenda said, the sky isn't falling. But you do look at some of these numbers and it is kind of, it is startling, right? To think that a sanitary sewer pipe is going to last 400 plus years, or a roadway on average is going to last over 100 years. So I think one thing that's important is going back to that pavement condition index and that survey that we do every 4 years. That's a really good pulse of where we are, right? So we'll continue to collect that data every 4 years. And 2 years from now, we'll be back here and we'll say, here's what we found. And here's how things changed. Here's how our network changed. And that's a really important true up to where we are. Some of the other things too is just tracking our water main breaks and our major sewer repair breaks. So this last couple of years, we've had some major sewer repairs that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and are a major inconvenience to the public. Public Works is doing a really great job tracking water main breaks, sharing that information with us, and they've gotten into a great cycle for televising sanitary sewer and storm sewer on a regular basis. Again, that information is allowing us to make better decisions and do rehabs before we have failure. So I think we're doing all the right things. It's to continue to maintain and ensure that we are doing what we need to do to maintain our network.
And I think one of the things you got to say, Tom, is the engineering has changed. You have ability to look and monitor things much better than we did before. We're doing 40, 50 water break mains now a year. We used to have 400 or 500, but now we're down to a consistent number. The question will be to the commissioners, is 40 to 50 okay, or do you want 30 to 20? Do you want some of the stuff that they can look in there? I remember Ben looked in there with the television, and we had a break that was coming and had to be repaired. So there's a lot of things we can do now we never could do before. So it'll be a question of what the commission feels the level we should be as a city. And our pavement's held up a little bit because we've had a lot of new construction, so that makes it even higher than it is. But with Tony's home in the North Fargo, what does he tolerate in his street? And it's going to be just a question of where do we want to go with that? And that's going to be part of what comes out of your specials committee as well, is where does the people want? Right now, they seem happy with where they are. There was a time the city of Fargo, like you said, John, did not put money into this. And we've paid part of that price since that time, but I think we've done very well in the last 10 to 15 years. So. And we don't, do we need to approve that, or it's just information right now, or is the commissioners have allowed time to, if they have something in here they want to comment on, or what do you want us to do with it?
So in the ROA, you do have, we always take this first to our Public Works Project Evaluation Committee. So on there is a recommendation for approval. It does not need to be approved today. So if you guys want to take a look at it, think about the presentation, you have any questions, reach out to Tom or myself, and then we can put it on for the final approval. It'll probably be that January 2nd is we'll come back for the final approval.
You know, we might be in the new commission hall. Wouldn't that be nice to do it then?
I would love that.
Can I just say one more thing real quick? So while they have that slide up, I think the whole thing of the flood protection and the diversion and all that, that's a whole lot more work for the engineering department than regular work. That's the regular day of an engineer. And so the one thing this goes for all of our departments, this is above and beyond what's normally required for our engineering department. Does that make sense? I mean, this is a lot more work for them, and they've done a good job, and I don't recall too much complaining about it. So I want to thank you for doing that. But the other thing I want to say is I think we needed to deliberate. So getting their 37, is that diversion funding that should be paying for that? Or is that the city of Fargo? Is this part of the diversion, the buyouts and the future maintenance? To me, that's I don't know if that makes sense, but to me, that's a debate that we should think about. Whose liability should that be? The diversion or the city? Does that, I
We
don't know
can
if that-
debate that. Nathan can get in that too as well. Just for the commissioners, CIP in the future, do you like this format? We wouldn't go as much detail into pavement and such like that, but just to go over it, just federal money, state money, here's where we're going. Would that be reasonable with the commissioners? And we would normally give it sometime November? Is that when it's going to happen? So if going forward, we can do that. We could go to the January 2nd for the approval. And then please, any of you commissioners have any questions, go to the engineering department and ask. Great job. Thank you.
Our goal next year too is maybe you'll even see like a 3 to 5 year CIP. So that's our goal for next year.
Okay. Comment?
Well, I was just.
Grinberg?
Good. You say November, I was just curious, looking at the calendar, it should sync with a regular annual operating budget as well. So I'm just trying to get my memory refreshed. So if we have a CIP annual approval, shouldn't that also follow the process for approving our annual budget?
Bruce, would you have the CIP part of our budget?
I mean, it just seemed like it would make sense to have them together.
Yeah, we've come such a long way with this engineering CIP. It used to get approved in the budget year, so now we're at least proceeding the calendar. But I agree, we've got water and wastewater long-term CIPs that we approve with the budget, and so we'd like to, I think that makes good sense. We just have to
So that
really
move it
be
up
out in front of it.
to July, August?
Yeah, it's just when it comes to things like new development, it's based on requests and how far in advance those show up. But we'll work through those things, but we're trying to sync it up with the budget, yeah. But we've moved it up 6 months, so I'm proud of that.
Very good. Last item tonight, the JLG architects for the Fargo Performance Center feasibility analysis update. Mike Bellinger to address, I think Tony Grinberg-Polt.
I can provide a brief overview, Commissioners. In 2015, the City of Fargo performed a performance center feasibility analysis with HVS Consulting. Many of you will recall that effort. That information is available should anybody wish to take a look at that previous work that was put together. JLG Architects was actually one of the sub-consultants brought on board in 2015 to work with HVS to study this feasibility of a future performance center. And at that time, there was some additional supplemental work that JLG performed on cost and estimating the cost of such a performance center. So in 2018 into early 2019, what we'd like to do is revisit that work with the Performing Arts Task Force, take a look at what was done, but have JLG provide the lead services for this work. They want to utilize HVS and utilize Schuler Shook, who also provide some consultant services nationally for these performance centers. Update portions of that study, make sure that we're reflecting current conditions in the market, as well as some of the downtown redevelopment projects that have occurred since the 2015 study was completed. The other objective that we have in this work, and I think Commissioner Pepcorn and Commissioner Strand would agree, is that we need to confirm the facility's location, as well as update the pro formas and other cost estimates that was put together back in 2015. Ideally, at the end of the day, after this condensed scope of service, we want to come back to the Commission, come back to the Performing Arts Task Force, and talk about what these numbers look like so that we can start planning and really using this data to make some decisions for the future. As the Performing Arts Task Force, I know is very excited to get moving here in early 19. This is work that will help us get their work accomplished and keep us on schedule. So happy to provide any other.
So, Mr. Chair, to give you an example, so the new city hall wasn't there when this study was done, and so the whole that location and the skyways and all that stuff and
America we didn't have
in Block 9, and so all those things. So it's basically an update using a local firm.
Mr. Grinberg.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, have a brief update, and I didn't see any data in here, but what are we paying for this?
This will be at $25,000, and that was in the scope. So we wanted to bring this to the commission and just pull this off the consent agenda so that you could get that information. So we're happy to provide status updates on this process, and I know we're looking to schedule hopefully one more meeting with the Performing Arts Task Force before the year is out.
Can I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Garrick?
Yes.
Mahoney?
I have one item with commissioners I just want to discuss, and Jill Manette, if you'd come up to the stand. The governor has declared Christmas Eve day off for all state workers and given them the holiday, and we usually don't do something like that because it involves cost or change, or we haven't normally done that. But one of the alternatives Jill and I talked about is you could take Good Friday, which we give off as a holiday of next year, and transpose that, give Christmas Eve off, and then take away Good Friday of next year. It would be equal swap for the city employees, one. Two, you could do nothing, leave it as is, and they can take, they have a flex day that they can take off on their own, but the city offices would still be open, so we still would have at least a skeleton staff around. And this only happens once in a while. We may want Jill to do a evaluation or a survey on this in the future, but I really wanted the commissioners to weigh in because I can't just make that decision without your approval. So Jill, you want to comment just what we had in discussion so far?
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, thank you. As the mayor laid out, really typically Christmas Eve is not included in our paid holidays for our employees. So the typical Christmas Eve, we have our offices open and minimally staffed for the public on that day. With the governor's executive order, that prompted the discussion. And so we have talked about, as the mayor stated, a few ideas of, either we can treat this year's Christmas Eve as we have historically and remain open with minimal staffing, or look at options for other paid holidays within the 2019 calendar year to help to offset the cost if a decision is made to close Christmas Eve of 2018. And the couple of holidays primarily discussed were the floating holiday or the Good Friday holiday coming up in 2019. Historically, the floating holiday years prior to our last policy update was really referred to as the birthday holiday. More recently, we've utilized that day as a floating holiday so that our employees who observe religious holidays other than those that are observed within the policy are able to utilize that date for a day off, or that floating day for a day off.
Jill, one of the
throughout
other
year.
questions was if we just gave them Christmas Eve day off, what would that cost the city of Fargo?
So a rough estimate, Kent and I were just visiting about that, would be about $220,000 if offices were to close. That isn't on top of current budget, but it would be, a non-productive day.
Commissioner Garrick?
I'd like to hear what the employees think about moving the Good Friday to Christmas Eve. That, to me, seems like the baseline. If they say no to that, then we can look at other options. But I don't know what they want, so I might as well ask them.
So if the survey came out, yes, we'd like to do that, then we should go ahead and do it because it's no cost?
It's their days off, really, so.
Yeah. Commissioner Pipcorn or Bloomberg, any comment? You're moving away, because...
I think we should ask the governor if he wants to pay for it, if he's doing it for the state. That's what I think.
Mr. Strand?
I don't care a lot, but I'd be concerned about respecting anybody's religious choices and not etching it in stone that it's just the Christian holidays that we would be honoring. So if we can give folks flexibility, if we go that route, to honor their own religious holidays or have those options, I would go that direction if possible.
And really, the flex day off, John, is just to try to honor that a bit if you have different religious holidays, to give you, rather than your birthday, a religious holiday that you could do.
So question, and it's a comment, so a motion tonight to give you the decision-making when the feedback, or, because we
could do a quick survey, and if that...
Because we're getting close 2 weeks from now, again, people could make plans, and that would be problematic, and so, and the question I have is, you mentioned 220,000 for one day?
For half a day.
How is that equated to dollars? I mean, I just, if you give somebody the day off, how do we? Is it just built up accrual time on vacation that we owe and our liability on our?
So the $220,000 would be if you chose to close non-public safety offices for Christmas Eve, and so you had non-productive time on that day. All of us are budgeted at 2,080 hours over the course of the year, so it isn't dollars on top of the current budget, but it would become a non-productive day for those of us in non-public safety departments.
So maybe said another way, we're not writing a check for $220,000. It's just.
Correct. It would just be non-productive time. If you just closed offices and did not utilize another holiday from 2019. Right.
Mr. Chair, I just, first of all, I'm not comfortable, this wasn't on the agenda. Whenever that happens, that's usually not a good thing. I think it's something you need to consider, and it's 2 weeks away. And I just, whenever this happens, it's usually not a good thing. I think we should deliberate about it and see what our options are, but I'm not comfortable with this. So my motion is to continue this. I do think we should ask the employees what they would prefer, but I think as us, I think we need to just continue it, because it's never good. We should never be in a rush.
Can we ask them, Dave, while we continue it, can we have her ask the employees what they think or not?
I think I would be in favor of finding out what would their preference be, but for us to act on this, it's not on the agenda. It's something that, well, who cares what the governor does? The governor does a lot of things, and God bless him, but that he's not the governor of Fargo. So anyway.
It's just the questions come up, Dave, and we're running out of time. So that's why, otherwise it'd be on the agenda next week, and we'd be at the same point as we need to do a survey. She can do a survey if that'd be of interest to the commission, and we could bring a report back next meeting. It's just that if people make vacation plans, it's tight.
And I get Dave's point, Mr. Chairman, but I would be comfortable with a motion that just gives you the decision-making based on data and employee feedback, so we're not dealing with this in 2 weeks because of the holiday.
Is there a second?
I have another comment, if I might.
I think we should have a second first, John. Is there a second to the motion?
Whose motion, Dave's or Tony's?
If you don't mind, I'll make a motion to continue it to our next meeting.
Second.
This will be interesting.
With the data.
With the data.
In the last comment, my last maybe is we should also remember what the private sector does. You know, I don't know that it's that common that people in the private sector get Christmas Eve off or not, and it might, I think we should always balance that with what people call the real world. Not that this isn't, but it's the balance of what they see in their lives versus what we offer public servants.
Mr. Gary, you had a comment? No?
Just a second.
A roll call vote?
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gary?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Yes. And then I think Commissioner Grinberg, you had one other motion to make about somebody?
Oh, yeah, I wonder if there's interest in passing a resolution from the city commission that would prohibit a certain employee from leaving us. Her name would be, or start with a K.
Katie Glenn.
No.
I think unanimous vote.
Mayor, if I have one.
Any other?
One final comment. I just can't imagine us not acknowledging that our country's grieving a president that died this week, and this is what America's all about, is public service and serving the public and the people, and the legacy of George Herbert Walker Bush is so significant, and it's just really in front of us all right now, some of the core things about our country. But when we have such a leader pass, I just hope we all give due respect and always acknowledge that.
Good reminder. Thanks, John. We'll adjourn. Thank you.